Welcome to Mindful with Minaa, where we explore how mindfulness can enhance your relationships and well-being. I'm your host, Minaa B, a licensed social worker, mental health educator, and author. Through insightful discussions, I will guide you towards self-awareness and self-efficacy, empowering you to effectively manage your relationships, reduce burnout, and be more present with yourself. So let's jump into today's episode. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Mindful with Minaa. I'm your host, Minaa B. And before I dive into today's episode, I do want to remind you to please remember to rate and subscribe to this show. Your rating, specifically a 5-star rating, really helps to boost this show and help with visibility. So I appreciate all of the shares, the reviews, and if you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to leave a comment. Now, I also want to share with you all that my book, Owning Our Struggles, has been on sale on Amazon for $15.99. So if you haven't gotten a physical copy of my book yet, this is the perfect time, especially with the holidays approaching. If you know someone who loves books and could utilize a tool that helps them with their mental health and helps them heal from trauma, especially through community care, my book, Owning Our Struggles, would be the perfect gift. So head over to Amazon. Everything is going to be in the show notes so that you can have the links that you need to order my book and find other ways to keep up with me. So let's jump into today's episode because I want to talk to you about a particular type of grief that doesn't always have language. This is a type of grief that comes from things that never happened. The relationship that didn't become what you hoped, the child you imagined but didn't get to have, the career milestone that didn't materialize, or even the life path that you wanted for yourself, but it just didn't unfold. This kind of grief is called ambiguous loss, and it's one of the most complex, least understood forms of grief we can experience. And what makes it especially hard is that it doesn't have a clear ending. There's no funeral, no closure, no defined moment of loss, yet we feel it in our bodies, in our hearts, even in our thoughts. And there are things that remind us of that loss wherever we go in life. And so in this episode, I'm going to unpack what ambiguous loss is, why it can resurface around the holiday season, why it's so hard to talk about the things we never had, and most importantly, how to navigate this grief with gentleness and self-compassion. So what is ambiguous loss? The term was coined by psychologist Dr. Pauline Boss, and it refers to losses that are unclear, uncertain, or incomplete. There are two main types. When someone is physically absent but psychologically present, like missing a person. So think about times where you might ruminate about your ex or even a loved one that you've lost touch with. This can happen for people who are estranged from a family member. This can also come up for those of you who maybe you had a friendship breakup or there was some sort of loss. And so the person is physically absent, but they remain psychologically present in your mind. The other type, however, is when someone is physically present but psychologically absent. This can come up when you have a parent who is struggling with dementia, for example, addiction, or even if you have a parent that is emotionally unstable or even unavailable. And so this can lead to you not having the type of relationship you want with the person, and you're mourning that because they're alive. They're physically here, they're earthside, but psychologically there is an absence, there is a distance, and it leads to you mourning. But beyond these traditional definitions, ambiguous loss can also describe the deep grief we feel when we lose something that was never fully tangible. It's the pain of the life you imagined but didn't get to live. And so this can come up as the partner you thought you'd marry but didn't, the baby you dreamed of but never had, the promotion, the home, the creative dream that never came to fruition. These experiences hold real emotional weight, yet they often go unacknowledged because they don't fit our cultural image of what grief is. No one sends flowers for the job promotion you dreamed of but never got. No one brings a dish to your home when the relationship you yearned for never materialized to grieve with you. And so what happens is we're left carrying this invisible grief, and sometimes we're unsure where to put it or how to even name it. And I believe the reason why ambiguous loss hurts so much is because it's open ended. When there's no concrete ending, our minds keep searching for a resolution. We replay the what ifs, the could haves, the maybe next times. It's like trying to close a book with no final chapter. So you feel like you just have to keep reading because when does it end? And so often there's a shame attached to it. You might tell yourself, why am I still sad about this thing? Or other people have it worse. That's when we start to pull out our measuring sticks and we engage in what I call comparative suffering. I shouldn't suffer because when I measure someone else's suffering, they seem to have it worse than I do. So I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to pretend I'm not sad. That is what comparative suffering looks like, and it benefits no one, because if you're upset, you're upset. If you're sad, you're sad. You have a right to feel the things that you feel, and other people having it worse than you does not take away from the fact that you're also hurting. So think about that and how shame comes up when we start to measure our pain or we start to measure our grief compared to other people. Sometimes you might even say to yourself, it wasn't even real. So why can't I move on? I wanted a relationship really, really bad. I didn't even get to the next step with the person. We were just dating for 2 months and the relationship of partnership and companionship never came. So why am I still stuck on this? You might say to yourself, I really, really wanted to have a kid. I never found the person I wanted to have a kid with. So why am I still stuck on this? This is your opportunity to sit with that grief. Because here's the truth, our bodies don't distinguish between literal and symbolic loss. The brain registers emotional pain as pain, period. So the ache you feel for something that never came to be is real grief. It's not just socially recognized. And that is why it's harder to bear with it, because it's an invisible grief. It is a grief that is often dismissed, and it is a grief that is often minimized. So I want you to pay attention to ambiguous loss right now in your life, because I noticed that during the holidays, this is when ambiguous loss can feel especially heavy. Holidays generally center gatherings, celebrations, and milestones, and they represent togetherness, family, love, and abundance. But for many people, they also highlight what's missing. Maybe you're surrounded by friends who are getting engaged, starting families, or buying homes and getting the jobs that they've wanted. And it stirs up the quiet grief of what you've longed for but haven't received. Maybe the holidays remind you of who's not there, the partner you thought you'd be spending the season with, the child or the additional children you thought you would have by now, or even the parent who never shows up physically or even emotionally. Sometimes even scrolling on social media can amplify that sense of loss because we're constantly being shown the life we think we should have by now. So if you notice sadness, irritability, or withdrawal during this time of year, it might be worth reflecting if there is a loss that you're experiencing that you haven't acknowledged. Grief doesn't just visit us when someone dies. It visits whenever we're forced to let go of something deeply meaningful, even when that something was never fully ours. And one of the hardest parts of ambiguous loss is that it's also hard to talk about. How do you explain to someone that you're grieving a relationship that never even began? Or a version of your life that only existed in your imagination? Because sometimes you might find that people will respond with confusion or even minimize your feelings. You'll find someone else. Don't get caught up on that guy that you went on 4 dates with, where in your mind, those 4 dates were special. They were magical. You finally felt, wow, I think I'm getting closer to finding my person because I've never experienced this before. Normally, the first date is awful, or normally I don't even get to a place where I'm going on a date. So for me to make it 4 dates in or 5 dates in, or to be talking to someone for 3 months and now we're done, there's a lot of grief that can come with that. And sometimes people will minimize that by saying, oh, you're going to find someone else. Don't worry. Why are you getting caught up on someone that you just knew for 3 months? Right? Or sometimes we might hear, maybe it just wasn't meant to be, or at least you still have time. So those words are often well-intentioned, but they don't touch the depth of what you're feeling. Because what a lot of people fail to realize is that what you're missing is the emotional reality of grieving a possibility. You're grieving a possibility. You're well aware most of the time that you might find someone else, or maybe you're not aware. Maybe your grief is heavy because you struggle to believe that maybe there is an opportunity for me to have a kid. Maybe there is an opportunity for me to grow my family. Maybe there is an opportunity that I will find someone else. The unknown is what's hard to grapple with sometimes, and being dismissed can be really hard. And that's why this form of grief is often called disenfranchised grief, because it's a grief that doesn't get validated or publicly acknowledged. And as a result of that, many of us learn to grieve in silence, to push the sadness down, to stay busy, to pretend we're fine. But unspoken grief doesn't disappear, it lingers. It shapeshifts into fatigue, irritability, self-doubt, or even a loss of motivation. So naming it is the first step to healing. So I want to give you some tips on how you can work through this kind of grief, because even though it may never have clear closure, you can still find meaning, healing, and peace. So here are some in-depth practical ways you can support yourself if you're dealing with ambiguous loss. First, I want you to name the loss clearly. Write it down or even say out loud what you're grieving. It can sound like, I'm grieving the relationship I thought I'd have. I'm grieving the baby I dreamed of or the large family I dreamed of. I'm grieving the version of myself that I thought I'd become. Language gives shape to emotions that feel abstract, and naming it is a form of acknowledgement. It's a way of saying, this mattered. Understand that the other part to this is recognizing that what you lost matters to you. It doesn't matter if other people can't understand it, they can't contextualize it, they struggle to acknowledge it. You're naming this loss because it mattered to you and it was important to you. So name it and sit with it. The next thing I want you to do is allow space for duality. Ambiguous loss is tricky because it lives in a paradox. You can feel gratitude and sadness, acceptance and longing. Instead of trying to move on, try to make space for both feelings. You can celebrate other people's happiness and still honor your grief. You can still enjoy the holidays and still feel like something is missing. That coexistence doesn't mean you're stuck. It just means that you're acknowledging the duality of the life that you're living. So I would encourage you to try to see life from a lens of the gray area that we tend to exist in versus black and white. It's possible for you to have two opposing thoughts and feelings at the same time, and it is okay to honor the space that you're in. So make room for duality. Everything in life doesn't have to be good, bad, right, wrong, either or. Sometimes it's an and. I'm feeling two particular things right now, and that's just how I'm feeling. Sometimes I also find it helpful to create symbolic rituals because ambiguous loss lacks tangible endings. So creating a personal ritual can help your brain and heart find a sense of completion. Sometimes when I'm working with my clients, I encourage them to write a letter to what never was and then safely burn it, rip it up, or even bury it. Sometimes you can create art, music, or even poetry to externalize your grief. You can even do things like lighting a candle or just making a memory frame or just having some sort of self-care experience that allows you to honor the dream that you desired for yourself that still hasn't materialized. I believe that rituals can make what is invisible visible. They validate that something meaningful was lost, even if no one else saw it. Another thing I want you to do is to watch for comparison triggers, especially around the holidays, because social media can make unfulfilled desires sting a little more. So I just encourage you to set boundaries with your digital presence if you realize you're just not ready to be exposed to people sharing pictures with their families or talking about their children or just sharing some of the things people tend to share around the holidays. So give yourself an opportunity to take breaks, mute triggering accounts, or even just limit your scrolling. And when you feel envy or sadness rise up, instead of judging yourself, remind yourself that you are grieving and sit with that. Honor that it's a feeling and allow that feeling to pass. Another thing that is important is practicing self-compassion, not self-blame. When we grieve things that never materialized, it's easy to internalize blame. So maybe you tell yourself you didn't work hard enough for that job and that's why you missed your chance. You tell yourself you weren't worthy enough or good enough and that is why that person doesn't want to date you anymore. Or you just tell yourself really self-damaging things as a way to try to make a sense of closure. Because that's what we do. When we can't make sense of reality, we don't realize how our mind easily goes to the negative, but we also go into self deprecation as a way to find closure around the thing that we're yearning for. But I want you to understand that grief isn't proof of failure. It's not proof that you're not lovable. It's not proof that you're not unlikable. It's just an experience. You're grieving because you care deeply about something, and unfortunately, that thing didn't work out. It's not a reflection of who you are as a person. So remember that you can have self-critical thoughts when you're in a space of grieving, and it's very important to practice reframing those thoughts so that you're holding yourself with compassion versus blame. Lastly, this is what I always encourage, which is seeking connection and safe people. Sometimes that looks like professional support from therapy or even a support group, but also this is a time to lean on your friends and whoever it is that you feel like holds a safe space for you so that you're not carrying this grief alone. So, as we move through this season, I want you to give yourself permission to feel your invisible grief, to name it, to honor it, and to remember there's no timeline for healing ambiguous loss. So, if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to take a few minutes after listening to journal on this question. What dream, hope, or possibility am I grieving right now? And how can I honor its significance instead of minimizing it? Understand that your grief is allowed to have a space to heal. And whatever it is that you've yearned for, you're also allowed to sit with those things. You're allowed to grieve those things, even when other people don't understand it. So thank you for tuning into Mindful with Mina. If this episode resonated with you, please remember to rate and review this podcast. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also leave a comment. I check every single comment and I love to engage with you all in the comment section. Also, share it with a friend. If you know someone who could really use this episode right now, share it with a friend. And also, you can find other ways to learn from me by checking the description box. You can subscribe to my newsletter, Mindful with Mina. You can also order my book, Owning Our Struggles, and you can follow me on all of my social media channels. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure you take care of yourself. And remember that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry love, but in new ways. Until next time.